That's her. That is her. Dude, Mike, it's a humongous tiger. Oh my God, dude.
Here we got her. Oh my gosh. We got her. Holy cow. The Gadorsey hog. Dude!
Welcome to the Musky Therapy Podcast. Please follow me this way. The doctor is ready to see you now. All right, folks, well, welcome back to the Musky Therapy Podcast. Joining me today is a very, very special person in the musky industry, somebody that I have been wanting to have on the show here since the start, and also somebody that I'm really, really glad I can call a friend of mine, Joe Fittante Replicas. Joe, thanks so much for coming on the show, man.
Oh, you bet, Chaz. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Joe,
appreciate it.
Dude, absolutely, man. I mean, do you ever get sick of people telling you that their musky mounts look beautiful?
No, I will never get sick of that.
I mean,
it's what I'm striving for every day. Yeah.
I mean, literally, it's got to be kind of hard to have. I mean, you walk around these sports shows, you probably get phone call after phone call and email. I mean, Joe, part of the reason, and I've got, we got a lot of really great things to talk about. Part of the reason that you are so popular, not only are you, a genuine person, which I guess I should say probably is the reason you're so popular, but you do good work, man. I mean, you're really truly an artist.
Well, I'm glad that you think that, Chaz. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Well, it's not only me. There's a lot of people that do think that.
Well, thank God that there are, because that's what keeps us going.
Absolutely. And
I'm grateful.
Don't think you're getting off the hook without talking about music too. But later on.
Okay. Okay.
But Joe, okay. So here's the thing. Your line of work, as I look around at my friends and even people in the musky industry, and you do have a very unique line of work. I mean, being in the taxidermy business, being in the replica business, is not something. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that do it, but it's still kind of a niche market, especially what you're doing with replicas. I mean, my first question for you, because by the way, folks may not know this, but coming up this June, 50 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's hard for me to say out loud because I have to admit that I'm an old guy. But
you don't look old.
I don't like to admit that, But yeah, I started in it was June of '72 when I started a business here in
Wow.
Anaheim. And yeah, it's hard. It's unbelievable. 50 years have passed. Yeah.
I mean, you don't look a day of it. I don't know how old you are, Joe, but you're in great shape. But here's what I want to kind of ask though. This is an intriguing thing. Like, I want to peel back the layers of Joe Fittante. I mean, tell me a little bit about if you don't mind. I want to dive in like your childhood. Like, how did you fall into? Because originally it started as a taxidermy business. Going back to 1972. Were you, I'll kind of tee up a couple questions to kind of lead you in. Were you originally going to go into something else? Or how did you get into this business, like way back in the day?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I thought all my young life I wanted to be a doctor, okay? But then and how that got derailed, who knows? Mainly because I probably didn't think I had what it takes to become a doctor, and whether or not that's true or not, we'll never know. But I certainly did a lot of hunting and fishing when I was in high school. In my early, from the time I was 12 years old on, and all my relatives did too, my uncles and my dad, and so we were an outdoor family, and so I naturally. Or I should say I came by it that naturally. And when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do after high school, I was going to college and wasn't really excited about what I was doing. And first, I don't know how I ever got the inspiration to pursue taxidermy, but I did for whatever reason. And the history of that is that I, in our small town of Anaheim, we've got a couple major players in the fishing industry.
Oh, absolutely. You have Maps, right?
Maps French spinners are made right here in Anaheim, and that's a big business. and of course Suick Baits too.
Oh,
Right
Suick,
down-
absolutely, yeah, that's Suick.
right down the road. And so I knew that Todd Sheldon, who was the president and the patriarch of Sheldon's Inc., which is the Mepps French Spinner family that owns the Mepps French Spinner. And I knew the family well enough that I could go to Todd and tell him I had this idea that I was thinking about maybe becoming a taxidermist. And he had all kinds of mounts in his office. He had grizzly bears, polar bears, and a whole wall of great-looking fish. And so I thought he would be the guy to ask. And he's a ultra-successful businessman. So because I wanted to pursue it as a business and not as a hobby, I wanted to talk to him about it. And back then, 72, there weren't a lot of professional taxidermists in the whole state of Wisconsin. There might have been a lot of guys doing it in their basement or in their garage for hobbies or whatever, supplemental income kind of stuff. But there weren't a lot of guys that were professional taxidermists. So I asked him what he thought about this idea, and he said, I think it's a good idea, and here's the guy I think you should talk to. And the guy that did all his fish and some of his mounts was a guy by the name of Fred Amon, who had a taxidermy studio north of Eagle River. And he said, I'll get a hold of him and you can go up and talk to him and just pick his brain and see what he thinks, And so I did that, and Fred Amon, who I also agreed probably did the best fish that I had seen to that date. And I did a little research and traveled around a little bit and visited a couple of taxidermy shops that were available. And I knew that Fred probably did the best work of all the folks that I had checked out. So I approached him with teaching me, and taxidermy is kind of a secretive craft, and these guys, the guys who were my peers back in the day, weren't that anxious to divulge any of their trade secrets. So it ended up that I paid him a certain amount to take me on and train me in the basic taxidermy skills for a year. And so I went up there, and I would drive from Antigo. I actually worked at Pizza Hut here in Antigo, and I would take off on a Tuesday morning at 5 in the morning. I'd drive up to Fred's studio, and I'd work with him Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Thursday night I'd drive back here, go back to work at the Pizza Hut, work Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday night, and then again Tuesday morning, drive up to Fred's place. And so I did that for a year, and he trained me in the basic taxidermy skills and the way that he did things. And so then I came back to Antigo, and so I did that in 1971. And in 1972, I came back and started a taxidermy business here, and kicked it off. I think it was June of 1972.
Wow.
Started
Joe.
small. Started small, threw a couple ads in the paper. And so anyway, that's how it started. And I can tell you that Antigonians weren't that familiar with what taxidermy was, really. I guess the guys who were hunting and fishing, they had a clue on it, but a lot of people outside the circle didn't. And when I started advertising, and I did a few ads in the paper, I had people calling and didn't know what taxidermy was. Do you have a taxi service? Do you sell fresh fish? Do you do taxes? I'm not kidding. So I had to educate, the general public on what I was doing. And let's face it, it's kind of a weird profession.
Well, but that's what makes it so, even today for me, Joe, it's what makes it so fascinating. And it's what's neat, too, is like listening to how you started in an industry, like you said, that seems, and even as an outsider, to me, it does seem kind of secretive. Like and that's what I'm excited to talk with you about today, because it's like I have no idea. I have some ideas. about how this works, but it's kind of behind the scenes. Most folks have no idea what goes into it.
Yeah.
So that's really so you started in 72 and how many years, because now people, and I'm going to come back to the beginning, but now people think Fittante Taxidermy and Replica Studios, Fittante Replicas. I mean you and Ben and your company is a major operation, and you said obviously with it's been growing for a long time, and with COVID, and the pandemic, it's grown even more.
Yes,
but
yeah.
when did you, going back to your taxidermy days, like when did you really feel like you hit it off? I mean, was it like, 5 years, 10 years in, or was it a couple years in? I mean, did you find success right away? Was this kind of like,
No, it was a long time. It's grind. I'm still quite sure that I've made it, but
that's very humble.
I'm still striving to do that.
It's very humble of you to say
Tell
that,
me
Joe.
when I made it, Joe. Yes, you can tell me when. But yeah, it's been a long journey, and it's up and down. Like because it's kind of a niche business and a craft and something you have to develop a style, and you have to develop your quality. And so that's not in this business. That doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time. I remember the first walleye I ever painted. It took me 15 hours just to paint it.
Wow.
And that's because I just couldn't get it right. I didn't like what I had done, so I kept washing it off with lacquer thinner, starting over, and so it's been a journey.
So Joe, who was your mentor north of Eagle River again? What was his name?
Fred Almond.
Fred Almond. Did you? So before you went to mentor with Fred, had you been kind of like, you kind of alluded to this, but had you been kind of experimenting in your garage a little bit, like before you went up to him?
Yeah, I did. When I decided that this was something I wanted to look into, there was a company back in the day called Northwestern School of Taxidermy that was a mail order kind of a thing, and I can't even remember what it cost. It might have been $25 for all the books you needed to have to learn how to do it, and it was kind of prehistoric, in a way, but it gave you the kind of an idea of what goes into taxidermy. And so when I did go to train with Fred, I had some basic knowledge of what we were doing. It's just that he was so much more refined and had a great style.
Wow.
And I really feel fortunate that I was able to work with him and learn his style, especially his painting techniques, which have obviously evolved over the years. And
do you still find yourself do you every once in a while remembering something that he taught you painting nowadays, some 50 years later? I mean, do you ever
I still use some of the techniques that he showed me, and but I've just developed them further.
Absolutely. I was going to say that.
They were.
So,
But I remember just having a tough time, even when I was just learning how to paint, and I remember he gave me a Musky for me to take home, which I immediately put up in my bedroom and hung it opposite of my bed. So every night I looked at that as I fell asleep, trying to figure out how to paint that the way that Fred painted.
Wow.
And eventually, because he showed me the basics, and I had to learn other things on my own, but he gave me the foundation I needed
wow.
to move forward. And so I was really, I can remember just being hungry to learn how to paint, and you have to learn how to do everything else before that, but I can remember just thinking, this is the most important thing. I know that this is the most important thing for some reason. And so I was just bugging him all the time. So when are we gonna paint? Well, you got to learn how to do this first, and you got to do that first, and then we'll eventually get to that. And I was just dying to learn. And when I did, I found out that even though I knew how to do it, I couldn't do it. So I had to really work on it. practice.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, and I want to get to painting. That's coming, because that is the thing that I think, if you ask people, you know, what sets a Fittante replica apart? Like, and I'm, you know, as an outsider, I would say, you know, people say, well, Joe's painting, Joe's the life that you put into these replicas and these mounts, like that. And again, we're not, and I know you do other stuff, obviously. It's not just muskies and fish and walleyes. You know, you do, you know, all sorts of other, you know, creatures. But Joe, okay, so here's an interesting thing that I think that it's really going to be kind of neat to kind of go down this route in our talk tonight. So, and I think this is what really sets you apart is a businessman. And you know, and what's made you so successful, even though you're too humble to admit that you know you're there. You know, so here we are. You know, 1980s are coming along, and you kind of talked to me before. You kind of alluded to this idea of like, you know, catch and release is, you know, barely starting to take hold. And this is the coolest thing about your story, I think, is that you had the foresight to see, the taxidermy business is going to change drastically, and you saw this. And it's kind of like you know what's going through your mind. It's early 80s. You said, you know, Musky's Inc. is becoming a reality, and kind of what started this idea for you of, okay, I'm gonna make a replica. You know.
Well, I think it was because there was more and more talk about catch and release, and it just felt, and you know, no one's gonna ever accuse me of being a rocket science, okay? But why I had the inkling that something was going to change, because this was on the forefront. You heard more about every year. You heard a little bit more about catch and release and the philosophy of catch and release fishing, and that there's getting to be some pressure about that. You know, that there was some advice to fishermen, especially musky fishermen, that you need to do something to protect the resource, because it takes this fish 15 years to get to a place where it's a trophy. And more people are fishing every year, and if people keeping those fish, that it's just, you know, do the numbers. It's just not going to work out. More fishermen keeping more fish, and pretty soon you don't have the stock to create big fish, you know. So anyway, why I happen to feel that I needed to react to that, I don't know, because I remember just starting to accumulate fish that I could make molds, teaching myself how to make molds, and having talks with some of my peers, some of the other taxidermists that were in the business at the time, that were really kind of down on me for promoting replicas, because they made their money, and their income was dependent upon them mounting muskies, you know. And I tried to explain to them that it's not me. I'm not promoting this. I'm just reacting to what's going on, you know. And it's your choice. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But I'm definitely gonna pursue it and keep going in this direction, because I really did start at zero. There was nobody in Wisconsin making any replicas at that time.
I was going to say, arguably,
you were kind of a new thing. You didn't even know about it. You didn't even know the concept, you know.
Well, yeah, you were the first. I mean, arguably the first, or if you know, I don't. Someone might argue, but you might have been. You were probably the first person to really start the replica business in the state of Wisconsin, which is pretty incredible.
I think we were. I think that we were the first ones to start making replicas, and they weren't great at first, you know, and it wasn't easy to convince people to have a replica instead of a skin-mounted muskie. Matter of fact, the generation that came before me, like my dad's generation, those guys, and maybe it's hard to explain to a young guy like you what it was like back in the day. You just didn't go out and see 5 muskies in a day. You know, you might fish for 2 weeks and see a muskie, and so it was a big deal if you ever caught one. And so a guy that caught a muskie is so proud of the fact that he actually caught a muskie, and he wants that muskie. He does not want you to build a replica. He wants his fish, and there's no talking him out of it. That's just the way it was. So it was about changing the mindset of fishermen to accept, number one, the catch and release philosophy, and number two, having a replica made to represent the fish that they caught. So it took a long time, and
Absolutely.
And it took a long time for people to accept that.
Well, and so, and we'll get to that. I have all these footnotes down in my notebook here. We'll get to. You've obviously had a humongous impact on the muskie community, and you could argue the fisheries, all over the country. I know that's probably weird to think about it in that sense. But here's because I think of you. I think of you, in Fittante Studios. You're in Antigo, and okay, so you came up with this idea. You're going to make, and I'll just use muskies. I'm a muskie nut.
That's what it was about.
Well, you're going to make a muskie replica, but how did you ever start with the first? I'm sure you could probably remember the first replica you did for a paying customer that said, I caught this big muskie, I released it, could you make me a replica? And take me from the start. How did you start? And now it's obviously changed so much, I can imagine. I mean,
it has, but and it's not an idea that's unique to me. I didn't come up with the concept of casting fish and molding fish. They were doing it along the coast for years and years, and that's how they make the big sailfish and
okay,
marlin. Those are all cast fish, and one of the reasons that they do it that way is because the fish are so large, number one, and number two, there's so much oil in those fish that to make a skin mount of them, it just doesn't last indefinitely. There's a shelf life on that because you cannot remove all the oil. You can do the best you can, and you're still going to have some leaching over the years. And
interesting.
You've seen those old mounts that look all kind of wrinkly and they just don't look good. But the concept came from the coast of Florida and wherever you have ocean coasts and ocean fish. Those taxidermists there were making molds, for probably since the 60s. And so it just took that concept, even though I didn't know how to do it. I just knew that they did it, so I knew it was possible. And I did some research, and there was some information available. And so I just started kind of reaching out on my own and casting fish here and there. And then I had a friend who had a fiberglass business who made like snowmobile parts and fish tanks and minnow tanks and that kind of stuff. And he was real knowledgeable with all things fiberglass. And so I got together with him and told him what I wanted to do. And so together we cast first muskie, and it came out, and not like the muskies are today, but it was a start. And I knew that we really had to evolve it from where we started, because I knew it was going to be a hard sell to people who were kind of opposed to the whole idea in the first place. So in order to get them on board, I felt like we really have to make this authentic, So the whole gist of my pursuit of that was that I've got to be able to paint these fish so they look just like the fish that this guy caught, or he is not going to go for it. So that's still my main focus today, is trying to match as closely as I possibly can to what that fish looked like. And so that, along with any unique features that might have been on that fish, like a blemish or a lamprey mark or a split in a fin or a torn mandible or whatever, and if we can put all that back and show this guy, hey, that's your fish, and when they accept that, then we know that we can move forward and things are going to work out,
So
but
Joe,
it was a good, I had to do it didn't start out with everybody being on board.
No, absolutely. It's incredible history to this whole business you've started. And I guess so. I don't think, even though I think you've kind of hit on the a very general idea of fiberglass, molding a muskie or something. But could you walk us through, listeners out there, if they're like me, and I know they're just dying to know, like, could you walk us through kind of like, start to finish? And I want to get to painting, will be a whole nother topic, but how does this happen? Like, how do you go about creating a mold, or how do you make a replica? I mean, do you have different head sizes, different jaws, different fins and tails? I mean, it seems incredibly complex to, like you said, like your ultimate goal is for a customer to walk in your studio and say, that's my fish. And how do you do that? I mean, you would have to have so many pieces. I don't even know,
Well, that was the beauty of starting out in the early 80s and doing this, because people were still catching and keeping muskies all the time, because catch and release wasn't there. It might have been 2% of the fishermen were practicing catch and release in the early 80s. Okay. Nowadays it's 98%, but back then people were still keeping them, bringing the fish in, because we needed a real fish to make a mold. Okay. So I would, the guy, let's say a customer would bring in a fish, and we would mount it in a certain position, and then I would make a mold of it while it was unfinished. When the fish was, when we do traditional taxidermy, just real quickly, we make a sketch of the fish, take all the measurements, and then I cut that sketch out and put it on a big piece of styrofoam, and I cut that out, and then I put a curve in the fish, and I cut that out, and then I rasp that with a file until I get it down to the measurements and the shape of that fish that's supposed to be, and in the position that the fisherman wanted it. And then we mount the skin that we've cleaned and soaked in a solution to sterilize it and remove as many oils as we can. Then that musky skin is mounted over that form, and then it has to dry. After it dries, we repair all the fins and whatever's wrong, and then prep it for painting, and then I paint it. But so before I get to that point, when the fish is just dried on the form, then I'll take it and make a mold of it. Okay, and I use fiberglass to make a mold, like resin and fiberglass cloth, and then resin, and then fiberglass cloth, and then resin, kind of like building a boat, like building a fiberglass boat. So I make a mold of this fish, so it captures all the scale detail that is in that fish, and I make split the mold down the center, make a 2-piece mold. After I've done that, then I clean it up, and then I proceed to finish that muskie for the fisherman, and paint it, finish it, and he's on his way, and I have a mold. So I did that hundreds of times in the 80s, because what changed now, and what I really wasn't thinking about at the time, I was just trying to accumulate all these molds and all these heads and all these head forms, and so I could build up an inventory where I could eventually, take a mold. A guy wants a head left, and it's a 52-inch muskie or whatever, and he wants it in an up arch. So let's say I've got that mold, and then another 52-inch muskie in a down arch or whatever. So I just kept accumulating molds. So I've got hundreds and hundreds of molds that I made in the 80s and 90s. And so the difference now is that I don't have access, because nobody's keeping those fish anymore. So I have to work with what I have, and occasionally a muskie will die and somebody will offer that to me or whatever, and then we'll always take it and make a mold of it, Wow. But the molds are less available now, just because the fish are less available. So I'm just fortunate that I was diligent back in the day and made all those molds, because we can take those molds now and cast a fish and make a model, and now I can add to that, and I can change it, and then I can remold it, and that gives me another mold. So I'm accumulating so I can cover.
Now, see, that's wild. And the thing that is fascinating to me about this whole story is that you had the foresight, again, in the 80s, when you're saying this is going to be something big, people aren't catching on to this, but I'm going to start molding every muskie that comes in my shop, and now you have this huge inventory. So Joe, so then what do you do? So you have this mold, but then how do you make like this actual? Because like I know that you did this beautiful mount for me, my 54 incher from Lake of the Woods. That I mean it's a centerpiece in our home. How do you get that? It's a 3-dimensional fish. Like how does that work?
So I made the mold from an actual muskie, okay? And so the molds are one thing, and I guess we should talk about the nomenclature, okay? The mold is one thing, and the casting is another thing.
Okay.
So we take that mold, which is like a negative impression, okay? And and there's two sides to it. So then on the inside of the mold, we put a separator, like a wax or a silicone, and then I paint a gel coat, which is a white fiberglass resin. That's going to be the first layer. And that's what's going to pull off the scale detail. Okay, so that's going to be the first layer, and then when that cures, then we put resin-soaked fiberglass cloth inside that. Okay, on top of that white, and then when that cures, we coat that with resin, and then another layer of fiberglass, and then another layer of resin. And so when that cures, we pop that out of the mold. So now we have 1/2 of a muskie's body, okay? And it's got the dorsal fin, the anal fin, and the tail fin on it. The pelvic fins we make separately because they stick out at a right angle, so you can't mold that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So we have these two halves, and so now we put those two halves together, and we tape the seams, and then we pour fiberglass inside the mold that will adhere the two seams together, and now we have a muskie body, a complete 360-degree muskie body. Now I've done the same thing with the heads, and we cast the heads separately, and so then, and those are made the same way that the body's made, with the white gel coat and the resin and the fiberglass cloth. And we pop those out of the mold, and we put those together, a seam down the middle, on the top and the bottom. And so then we start the assembly process. And in the process of molding, we install a board at the back of the fish on the side that's going to be against the wall. And there's a plywood, 3/4 inch piece of plywood that we put in there, so then we can screw a backboard and a hanger to the back of that fish when it's ready to go. In the meantime, we're screwing a working board, like a vertical board that is attached to the back of the fish, and then that fish is put in a vise so I can work on it and we can assemble. And that's what Ben does. That's Ben's job, and he's really good at it.
Wow.
So and we make all the fins separately. Like I said, we make the head separately. And then we also have a mold for the inside of the mouth, and we make that in 2 pieces, and then Ben installs that inside the head before it's placed on the fish, and that's made out of Bondo, actually. So auto bonded putty.
Well, wait, wow! Hang on, I really just learned something different. Wait, so the mold of the mouth goes inside the head, which is also connected to the body. So there's like 3 pieces.
Right. It goes inside the head from the back, and then it's placed in up towards the front of the jaw. And we've made this mold by making a rubber mold of the inside of the fish's mouth, and then we make that 2-piece mold out of Bondo, and when that hardens, Ben takes it and slides it up into the mouth of the fish and finishes all around the inside, and then the head is attached to the body.
Wow. So Joe, I want to get into painting, because painting is a very interesting thing to talk about. But how many? And I want to say this correctly, because now you're gonna be mad at me. You're the teacher. I'm the student here. So I'm just kidding with you. But so would you say, so the mold is what you pour the fiberglass in to make the cast of the muskie, is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so how many would you say, if you could, because I think you've probably got a lot, how many actual individual muskie molds from, who knows, from, I mean, what are the size ranges? How many do you have hanging somewhere in a warehouse or in your studio?
We have hundreds of molds.
And same with heads? You have all these hundreds of heads and stuff? And wow, that's wild. And how many, Joe, how many replicas would you say, I don't know if this is, I mean, if you could ballpark it, I mean, how many replicas do you do a year? How does that compare now? Again, just talking muskies with like musky skin mounts these days, which is obviously probably not much, but I mean, how does that even compare? Is it,
As far as skin mounts to replicas?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, geez, it's like 98%, 99%.
Wow.
Replicas to skin mounts. The only time we do a skin mount for a muskie is if one dies, and it can't be revived, and it's of legal limit, and the fisherman can keep it. Then we'll do a skin mount. Or let's say it's a kid that catches a muskie while he's perch fishing, and a muskie grabs his perch, and it's probably the biggest thing that ever happened in his fishing life, and he's outside of the muskie fishing community, and so he keeps the fish, and so then we skin mount that, but it's so seldom now that it happens. I mean, thankfully, all 98 or 99% of the muskies are released.
That's cool. And, that's cool.
And it's cool, really cool, because muskie fishing, I don't believe, has been any better than it is today. I mean, I think these are the best of times right now.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about it, all the Green Bay fish that are being caught, all the Lake St. Clair fish that are caught, all the fish that are 54 inches to 55 inches. I mean, you didn't hear about that so much back in the 70s or 60s, There's just so many because people are throwing back fish that are 45 inches long. They've already made it. They're just going to do nothing but get bigger.
And exactly, even those, the state record quality fish we're seeing that, the 52s and 53s that are going back, that are being caught at 56, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and it's a proven fact that fish that are, and I don't think a fish biologist will disagree with this, that bigger fish that spawn, that spawn has a greater chance of becoming a big fish than spawn from a smaller fish.
I would totally agree with that, and for so many reasons, as a science teacher, we could dive in on that. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah,
sensible,
The Musky Therapy Podcast is brought to you by Joe Bucher Outdoors, #1 in big game fish products, and by Recon Boats, made by craftsmen, built for fishermen. Got her! Oh my gosh!
Okay, so Joe, here's another question here, and this is one that I think that we kind of hit on this, but again, I'll just restate this for listeners, and I know that our listeners are you are known. So when you pick up a muskie from you, I mean, obviously we've talked about you and Ben. There's so much work that goes into the actual cast and the head and the position, but really then from there, I'm going to throw this out there. I think the life in that fish comes from the painting. And I loved I actually got goosebumps when you said you looked at that, Fred gave you that muskie mount and you posted it, across from your bed. You looked at it every night, and, back in the 70s. And here we are now in 2022. And, why people choose Fittante and why I chose, you to do my biggest muskie of my life, is because of your artwork, and I say art because it's not just painting. Anybody could paint a muskie. I could paint a muskie, but it's not everybody that can really breathe life into something that isn't living anymore. And that's a really beautiful thing. And so I guess my question with that, teeing you up here a little bit, is what's the process that you go through? I'm thinking of you, like if I'm envisioning Joe Fittante, I'm thinking of you with a breathing mask on, you've got spray guns, and you've got, I mean, how do you go from, this kind of, I'm thinking it's going to be gray looking, fiberglass to this beautiful fish that looks like it could, you could put it back in the water. I mean,
well, thanks, Chaz. I'm sure.
well, it's true though, Joe. I mean, your work
Well,
speaks for itself.
Well, thank you. The fish. So when we get the fish prepped before it's painted, it's pure white. You know, it's.
I would have thought it was gray. Okay, so I learned
snow
something.
white because that gel coat is Snow White, and so then I take that and I will black it out, you know, and I'll paint. Fish are shaded from the bottom to the top, from light to a little darker to darkest on the top, and so I basically paint them that way underneath first. I make them dark on top, a little lighter on the sides, and then white on the belly. And so then, when I have the whole fish in that kind of shaded stage, I will take and start putting all the markings in. So the markings are kind of a darkish, brownish, black shade, where I will put all I'll first start with the fins, and the fins are spotted in many cases and have some lines and different figures in them, and the tail the same. And I'll do all the fins and the tail first, and then I'll do the head. And around the jaw is painted, you know, dark on the lower lip, and then as you move back towards the cheek, it becomes mottled. And I'm trying to think how I can describe this. I guess I wasn't thinking that I would have to do that.
You're doing a great job for me. Joe, I'm envisioning you doing this right now. I can see you in the studio.
Well, I'm glad I'm not taking you down a path that I can't describe. But
dude, I'm loving this, man. I've always wanted to know this. And one question, if I might, I don't want to throw you off, but are you looking at, like, do you have like an iPad pulled up? Do you have like a photo of this fish when you're like doing this? Like, how does this?
What I have is I've inputted the fisherman's photo into a video screen in my paint room. And so I've got like a 36-inch video screen, which I have flash drives with all of my customers and all of their fish photos. So I pull it up on that screen, and I can pull it up, you know, and enlarge it and look at different areas of the fish to give me the ideas I need.
Wow. So you said you've got this, like, because obviously the belly is white, but you've got a white belly and you've got a dark top, and then you start coming in and making these intricate little, you know, the lines
Bars,
and the spots and the bars.
Yeah. And they're all individuals, you know. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the fisherman's photo, and I'm starting like in the tail section, and I'll only take like 6-8 inches of the tail section and get that done, and then I'll move my focus to the next 8 inches and the next 8 inches until I'm up to the head with the barring and the spotting and getting as close as I possibly can, and then onto the cheek, and so once I get that done and all the markings are put in the fish, then I'll start with the color, because now all I really have on the fish is really kind of a silvery background with dark spots and lines.
Oh,
and
man.
stripes.
Wow.
And,
Okay.
And so then I'll start with color, and I usually start with yellow, and then I will come up from the bottom and just keep shading. And I don't mix up a color and say, like, if this fish has got kind of a bluish green background or whatever, the top third of this fish is bluish green, I won't mix up a bluish green. I will mix my paint on the fish. So I use all primary colors. So I'll use blue and yellow and white and red. And then if I need a bluish green, I'm mixing as I spray. I'll input the blue, and then I'll come back with the yellow to get the shade of green that I'm looking for. So I won't like mix up a green and put it on. And then so when I get satisfied with the color match from what I think it should be to the picture, then I have some metallics that I also apply that come in after that to make that bronzy kind of coppery area on the what you call the shoulder of the fish, and so that's basically how I do it.
Wow, and I know Joe. I feel like I'm really talking to an artist right now. This is pretty incredible.
Well,
So here's an interesting question as you're going through this. I mean, how long? This is an interesting question. I think how long from start to finish does it take to do, a 45-inch muskie? Like, and I can imagine a tiger muskie maybe would take longer to do or something like,
Tiger muskies do take longer. Northern pike tackle, I'll charge more for that just because it does take longer.
How long?
So, I mean, it takes several hours from start to finish to paint one muskie.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then that doesn't include the fact that now, after we're not painted, now I've got to start doing the finish coating. And so there's a kind of a preparation for that, too. And we use my style is to use a high gloss finish because I just like what that looks like. And I like the fact that it's a thick finish that I have to brush on. I don't spray that on. I spray everything else, but then when I get to that finish, I brush that on. And it's got a thickness to it. And the reason that I like that is because it gives depth to that painting. So when I'm done painting that fish and it's dull, it's on that fish dull, it's on top of the fish. It looks like it's on top of the fish. But after I apply that final clear coat that gives it some depth, then that painting looks like it's inside the fish instead of on top of it. So that's what I'm always after. I'm always trying to get to that point. So
that is so cool, man.
Yeah, hopefully, hopefully, so far, I mean, I'm pretty lucky. I mean, and I do get those emails and I get those calls and I mean, I just finished a couple days ago. I just finished this gal's fish. She was a woman's winner for Musky's Inc. last in 21, I believe, and she got her fish today, and she wrote me this beautiful email, and I mean it's really meaningful to me to get that confirmation. I can never get enough of that.
Joe, that is so awesome, man, to hear that. And that gives me almost, I don't want to say I'm getting teary-eyed, but it's kind of like you get that wow, it's a work, it really, when it is truly a work of art, because it sounds like, it's like when you're explaining this to me, it's like you're sawing things, you're cutting stuff, it's dusty, it's nasty, it's dirty, and then there's this painting phase, and then it's like, when it's all done, it's like so pretty and beautiful, and it's really a neat thing. Okay, here's a question for you, Joe.
Well, thank you, Jess.
Well, I'm a fan. So for you? So Joe Fittante, the master here. What would be your favorite replica to make? So if this comes through the pipeline, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to do this. What would that be for you? And maybe this is a bear. Is this a deer? Is it maybe not? It's not even a muskie. What might this be?
Oh man, that is a good question that requires thought. And,
this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be easy, Joe.
I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite thing like that. My favorite thing is when I'm done and I think, oh, okay, that I couldn't do that any better. That's the absolute best I could do on that, and I'm really happy with that. So that's probably my favorite thing, when it turns out the way I want it to go, and that I think that just couldn't be done any better.
Wow.
At least not by me.
That's okay. That's cool.
But yeah. And I guess fish that are marked in a really unique way. I guess that are really challenging to be able to reproduce and have this fisherman be really happy with it. Those are really meaningful things for me. I've had folks come in and look at their fish and start crying.
Wow.
These are guys, okay? These are hard guys, and and one guy in particular whose fish was just beat up. I mean, it had all kinds of scars and blemishes and fin tears, and he just teared up when he looked at it. And I mean, that it just doesn't get better than that. You know,
No,
that means so much to me that I just think I'm a people pleaser. You know, whether that's a chink in my personality or a good thing. I think it's probably a good thing, but it drives me to want to do good for people and want to. I mean, after all, I am not curing cancer, you know, on a daily basis. I'm not really making a huge contribution to civilization with what I'm doing.
I don't know if I'd say that, Joe.
But I'm making somebody happy, and that is a big deal to me. I can remember one time had a guy, a fellow who probably was in his 50s, and his dad, who's in his 80s, caught a muskie, and he, the son wanted to do it for his dad as a surprise at Christmas time. And so we had it organized where he was going to bring his dad up, and he, on the pretense that we were going to choose a mold for his muskie, you know. And so he brought his dad up, and I had finished the fish. So he was actually going to be picking it up this day, but his dad thought they were just coming up to choose a mold.
Oh my gosh.
Fish it. And so, and they drove up from like northern Illinois, so they made a big trip to come up to the shop. And he brought his dad in, and his dad showed me the picture, and I said, yeah, you know what, I think I'm just finished one that I think would work for your fish, so let me go in the back and get it. So I went in the back and got his fish, brought it out, hung it on the wall, and I said, what do you think? He said, God, that looks just like my fish. I said, well, that's because it is your fish, and your son had this done for you. And I can hardly retell the story without choking up, but he started crying.
Wow.
And couldn't stop.
Joe, that's incredible, man. I mean, Joe, that was actually my question was this to you. My next question was, you know, what do you love most about your job? I said 50 years this June. What keeps you going? I think you just answered that question for folks. I mean, what keeps you going is, I mean, moments like that where you're like people.
Exactly. You know that's exactly it, Jazz. And I mean, that was probably 15 years ago. Wow. And every time I think about it, I get choked up.
That's wild, man. Okay, Joe. All right, so switching topics here. So one thing that's also really unique about you that I think we definitely would be it would be a sin to not just discuss this, because it's also pretty amazing. So outside of your painting, outside of your painting specialty and your artwork, you're also an artist in a different realm as well, which is really you're artsy all the way around. And I don't use the word, I don't ever like the word artsy. I'm like, that's kind of a weird word. But you're an artist in so many different ways. Joe, you've got a voice, man. You've got a band. You play with the Top Raiders. You've got your own. Are you still? Is it the Hip Pockets? I don't know if the Hip Pockets are still around.
Yeah, Hip Pocket is around.
Dude, so how long have you? I don't want to keep you too long, but like so here we've got a guy. I imagine here's this kid in 1972 that starts a taxidermy business. When did you pick up? When I say pick up a piano, when did you play the piano, start singing, and like how does that fit into the picture? Because you're a musician, you've had bands, and you know.
Yeah, my mom forced me to the sisters at St. John's to take piano lessons when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I took it for 2 years until I finally convinced her that on Saturday morning I want to play baseball. I don't want to be taking piano lessons from the sisters at St. John's, and I begged her to let me out of it, and she finally did, and I kind of wish that she wouldn't, because I'd be a lot better piano player today if she would have just kept me there where I should have been. But anyway, yeah. So I started piano early, but then back in the 60s, the late 60s, I was when I was in high school, the Beatles showed up in 1964, and so it was probably, before the Beatles showed up, there were no garage bands, and the day after the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan, there was 1,000 garage bands, and so I, like a lot of kids my age, wanted to be one of the Beatles, and I wanted to be Paul, of course. But anyway, so that's where the inspiration started, and I started playing music in high school, and so had a band in high school, and then after high school, I kind of let that go, and realized that that's probably not something I'm gonna pursue. So then went to college, and then got into taxidermy and got that career started. And then I was married, and then we're having kids, and I wasn't thinking about music. And so it's probably, I didn't play for like 25 years.
I was literally just going to ask that. I'm like, how long did, holy cow, so you took lessons as a kid, and then you went 25 years without really getting back into it?
Yeah. 25 years.
How did you...
had a big Hammond organ I stored in a storage building, and 25 years later, so I think it was like 1997, 6, something like that, and some contemporaries of mine were playing music, and I just thought I wanted to do that again, and so I talked to them and see if they needed any keyboard player or whatever, and they did, and so I started out playing with some guys who were professionals in different realms. One was a cardiac rehab nurse. Another guy was actually the CEO of our local hospital, and another guy was worked in the lumber industry, and another guy was a healthcare counselor, which is always a good guy to have in a band. And so I got together with those guys in 97 or 6, something like that, and started playing. And it's just kind of evolved from there. I knew that if I ever played music again, there's a certain kind of band that I wanted to have. And it was a band with horns and girls, singers,
Yeah.
And so I finally, I got that in Hip Pocket. But in between that, before Hip Pocket, and the first band that I started with locally was called the MLC Blues Band, and some people thought it was Mo, Larry, and Curly, but it was actually for midlife crisis, and because we were all about that age, 40, 45, in that neck of the woods, and when that band started. And but then after that, I had a picture in my office of the band I had in high school, and had the bell-bottom pants and the paisley shirts and all that. Joe Bucher was in one day, and we didn't really know each other that well, but I had done a couple things for him, and he looked at that and he said, "What's that all about?" And I said, "Yeah, I used to play music back in high school, and I'm kind of getting back into it." And he said, "Well, that's funny, because I played music too," and he was a guitar player in Milwaukee. And Wauwatosa, I think that's where he grew up. And he actually was got himself into a band that had a hit record called A Little Bit of Soul.
Wasn't that with like Raven Straight or something?
I think that was the band he had before.
Before that?
Either before or after, I don't know. But he that band. The song was A Little Bit of Soul, and I can't remember the name of the band right now off the top of my head, but it was a tune that actually was related to fishing, because it went like, "When you're feeling down and the fish don't bite, do-do-do-do, do-do-do-do," and that was a hit record back in the maybe late 70s. And so he toured with that band, and we talked about that, and he said, "You and I should get together and do something musically." And so he said, "I'll call the guys that I played with, and let's think about this." And so he put it together, and then the Top Raiders were born, and and he's just a heck of a guitar player. He's probably one of the best guitar players I've ever played with, and I've played with a lot of guys in the last 20 years, and he's amazing to me.
Joe is incredible.
He's incredible, and he can go and not pick up his guitar, and a year later pick up his guitar like he never missed a beat. And I think that he's just this really good student. He can play Carlos Santana guitar solos note for note, okay, and doesn't miss a beat. And he blows my mind, really. And I think that that's probably how he is with musky fishing too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You've been with him so much, fishing and filming and talking. I just think he's one of those guys that's so detail oriented that, and it all goes into his head, and he remembers it. And he's the same way with hunting big whitetails.
You're not kidding.
Whatever
man.
he takes up, he's going to be successful.
Masterful.
He's one of those guys, you know.
Well, now you're getting me all fired up because I know I saw a post not too long ago that the Blues Fest is a go for July 2022, which my buddies were all texting me right away like, did you see the post? The Top Raiders are going to be back, man. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I think that I'm trying to remember, but. Oh, I'm thinking that the first Blues Fest was like in 1999, and we've done it every year since then. And so we only get together that one, or have been only getting together that one time a year, and we have a rehearsal here at my place the week before, and then we play the Blues Fest. And that's what's so amazing, about him. And he's he wants to get it right, and he's a perfectionist, and he expects that that's the way you'll be too, and so it just makes you better. You know what I mean? It just makes you better when somebody. That's
so cool that you guys literally you and Joe Bucher hooked up for music based on your photo of a high school band, and you're in bell-bottom pants.
Yeah.
And then now it's spanned. Gosh, I mean, how many years is that? Over 20, 25, or how many years is that now?
Yeah.
I mean, so many years later, 20-some years, you guys are still playing the Blues Fest, and it's by the way, it's like, right, your Blues Fest gives back to all these organizations in these towns that need money for their sports equipment, and it's like, it's a really beautiful thing. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, it is, and when you get together for a good cause, just good comes from that, And so it's made a lot of money over the years for the Northland Pines School District, and I know they all appreciate that, and they turn out to support it, and they turn out to help it, and that, by the way, is actually how Hip Pocket was born back in the day.
Really?
When you play music, you have a circle of musical friends that you can call on to play here, there, or wherever you need a guy, and I remember it was 2010 it was, because there was a tsunami that year in Haiti, and they were looking for people who wanted to contribute to raise money to send to Haiti in support of people who were affected by the tsunami. And so there was a thing in Three Lakes, and a couple guys that I knew called and said, can you guys, like my brother Mike is a drummer in Hip Pocket, and this was before Hip Pocket was born, and we went up there and got together with these other musicians, and there were some horn players there, and they weren't used to playing like R&B music, like Ray Charles stuff or whatever. And so when we got on stage, we said, hey, can you guys do this, this, this? And there was a couple girls there, and we said, can you do this? They'd never done that kind of music. And we put it together on the spot. And I said to Mike, I said, we got to do this. I mean, this has got to move forward here. We can't let this just go. This is exactly what I really want to do. So let's find the players, and that's where it got off the ground. And in Three Lake at the Black Forest. Forest.
At the Black Forest?
Yeah,
No
yeah,
way.
that's where the fundraiser was. And so here we are. The band has evolved, and the players have changed over the years. My brother Mike and I are the original members, and the band is different now, but we've had the same band that we've had now for about the last 6 or 7 years. So we started 12 years ago, and we're still, and it's evolved to the point where it's at now. The band is really good.
Now, I got one thing I want to say.
Players.
Well, two things I want to ask you about Hip Pocket. First thing is like Joe, because your piano playing is off the charts, and I'm going to give you a quick compliment here. But it's like the funny thing is because you're not a tall guy. I mean, neither am I. You're not a tall guy,
Did you notice that?
But Joe, your voice is huge, man. You walk into a venue and it's like, whoa, like who's the guy on the vocals, man? It's like you got this voice, man. That's the leadoff song of the Blues Fest every year is you on vocals, and it's like, yep. It's happening. This is the Blues Fest.
Well, thank you. And that's something I have that I can't take credit for. God gave me a voice, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that I get to use it like that. I'm a mediocre piano player. And, my voice is what gets me in the door. So
well, you did take 25 years off.
What's that?
You did take 25 years off before you played again.
I did. But I'm so happy that I'm playing again, and it brings me great joy. And it's just so much fun for me. And it takes a lot of energy, and I'm tired, when I'm done. But
you're living.
I can't get enough of it. I just love it. Every tune, it's like, gosh, we get to do this, and that tune is over, and I get to do it again. It's like one after another. It's just such a wonderful.
So, Joe, if somebody wanted to see Hip Pocket this spring, summer, or fall, is there anything you got lined up right now that you could kind of throw out there?
We are just so busy this summer.
So if I wanted to bring my fiance out to see Hip Pocket, where would you recommend I see you guys?
Yeah, you could. You could go to our website, and we've got our calendar listed there. But
okay, that's easy.
One of our biggest events is, and it ties into the Muskies, is in Boulder Junction for Musky Days, and they're like into their 50th year with that, and we've played for the last 7 or 8 years on Friday night on Main Street, and there's several thousand people there. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It makes us feel like we're rock stars, and because when it gets a little dark and the lights are on, and you just can't see the end of the people. They just fill the whole street, and they're right up to the stage, and they're all singing, and they're all dancing and jumping, and it's just so great,
That's awesome.
So that's a good venue to go to, Chaz, and the fact that it's Musky Days is right in your wheelhouse.
I like that. I like that a lot. All right.
But we're there, and we're in Green Bay several times. We're in Wausau several times, and we're around.
And Joe, what's your website? That just so
it's hippocketrocks.com.
Hip Pocket Rocks.
www.hippocketrocks.com.
I'll put that in the description of the video as well.
Yeah. That's great. We're up in Park Falls. That's also Musky Country. Just down the street from Ross's Sports Shop, which is a Musky stop there. And we're at the Elks Park. We're there sometime in July for an outdoor concert. We're on the Wisconsin River in Tomahawk in July as well for an outdoor concert, and those are all great places.
Dude, you got a busy schedule, man.
Dang. I do. Between I've got a couple of other things percolating. I have a small band that I play with also called Mojo, and I became involved with a band in Green Bay that asked me to sing for a Chicago tribute band, and that band's called Live Again, the Chicago Project. And
that is so cool.
They guaranteed me that we'd only play about a dozen times a year, and so I said, I think.
I want to sing Old Days right now, but I don't want to embarrass myself.
What's that?
I want to try singing Old Days, Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Right.
Do you guys
Get
do
up
that
there,
song?
man. Yeah, we do that song, and we have two. Well, we actually have three male singers in that band, and the youngest of the three of us sings that song because it does get up there a little bit.
It does,
But
yeah.
thought I should sing that song because I could talk about old days better than any young guy can talk about old days and howdy doody and
Oh, that's funny, man.
But so in that band he sings. He's probably 30, maybe, and he sings all the Peter Cetera stuff, and I sing all the Robert Lamb stuff, and our rhythm guitar player sings the Terry Cass stuff.
Wow.
So it's a good show. It's a a couple-hour show, and we've got a guy, a DJ that goes with the band and comes out 3 or 4 times during the night and does a little history lesson about Chicago and about some of the music, and it's interesting and it's cool. So you can see that. You could check Facebook out for Alive Again, the Chicago project, but yeah, Hip Pocket's the main thing, and there'll be a lot of places you can catch Hip Pocket this summer. I think my schedule is, I think I've got like 60 events so far this summer. And
oh my
and it
gosh!
would be good. I mean, I pretend to be a rock star, and it'd be good to be able to do that.
Joe, you kind of are a rock star.
If I can live a rock star life, like which would include sleeping until noon and then getting a massage and just relaxing and have people taking care of me, but I got to be back in the shop at 7 o'clock. So
oh
if I'm
my
playing,
God!
And most of the events that we play are not like 1 o'clock in the morning things. They're over at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, but that's a busy schedule, man. Holy cow!
Yeah, it is.
But you're having fun. I mean, you're
I'm having
living.
fun, and hopefully I can survive it and live to play another day.
All right, Joe. This is incredible. God, I still wanna belt Old Days right now. I love that song.
Hey, we'll
don't
we'll get together and do that.
Don't let me ruin the podcast. Don't let me ruin it. Okay. Okay. So last question, Joe, and this is so prepare for this is kind of a tough one maybe, but this is my last question for you, and then I want to end with one other thing.
Okay,
but
go for it.
This is an interesting thing because you're gonna get mad at me for. I don't say get mad at me. You're gonna say, Chaz, you're so humble, Joe. It's one of the things I love about you. You're so humble. But Joe, I would say you're definitely a visionary. You saw this replica business before a lot of people saw it, and you made it happen. And here's a question for you. What's the future look like? Is there anything, I guess, within Fittante Replicas in your life? Like, do you, maybe there's something, maybe you could leave us with a teaser of like, okay, I can't talk about it, but, there's something coming, or is the future, is it more on the line of perfecting what you've started? Or, I mean, what's it look like for Fittante Replicas? What does it look like for you in the next 10 years? I mean, what do we got on the agenda?
Well, at this stage of the game, Chaz, 10 years seems like a really long time. I hope it is a long time. Let me say that. I think that I don't really have any revolutionary kind of processes or anything coming up. We're always trying to perfect our molds. We're always trying to perfect our product, and I'm just trying to make the next one better than the last one, and that's always been my goal. I've always tried to make the next one better, and it's funny because as I remember back in the days, and as I improved with what I was doing, I would finish a group of fish, and I would think, gosh, those just can't be any better. And 2 weeks later, I'm thinking, you know what? I could do this, and I could do that, and I could do that. I got to do this better. And so it's a constant evolution, a constant search for making the next one better. And so I'll keep on doing that. And I'm also teaching my son Ben, who's in his 10th year, by the way, here working with me. And Ben then went to school to got a degree at Oshkosh, UW Oshkosh, got a degree in criminal justice because he thought he wanted to be a policeman. And he decided he didn't want to, and it was even before it got difficult to be a policeman, that he just thought, I don't think I want to do this. And he had worked in the shop pretty much all his life, and worked here through high school, and came home and on the weekends in college and worked, and so he decided he wanted to be part of the business. And so I'm training him, and he's perfected the mechanical parts of assembling and creating and building replicas, and everything I give him to do, he does better than I think that he could have, and does a lot of things better than I do. And he hasn't started to paint yet. He's just getting into that, and it's going to be several years before he's ready to be able to paint on his own and take over the business. So I think that is the goal, though. That's the goal for him to succeed.
That's a really neat answer for the future question, because I could think of no neater legacy. You started this incredible business, and now your son is following in your footsteps. And Ben is obviously, he's known in the Musky community as such a great guy too. I mean, it's like he is such a sweetheart. He is. I mean, he's amazing. Would just as soon hug you than anything else. We have this joke, by the way, about Ben. But we have a joke within our Musky Master crew that we've never seen a guy meet so many people. We went out one time at one of the Musky shows, and Ben, he has this personality about him. He could go to any table and make friends with anybody.
Yeah, he's always been like that.
Incredible. He's really a neat guy.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that we have the relationship that we have, and he tolerates me very well. Because I'm more of a he's kind of chill. If you know Ben, he's pretty chill, unless he's catching a muskie, and then he's nuts. Then he's nuts. And I don't know if you saw that picture of him. He caught his biggest this past year.
Yes, I did.
We mocked up a picture of him on a fake muskie hunter cover, and I don't know if you've ever seen that. I'm going to have to.
I can't wait.
The expression on his face, I mean, he absolutely should have been on the cover of Musky Hunter with that, because it is like unbridled joy. There is no way you cannot get from this picture how he feels.
Well, and I also...
And you, as a musky fisherman, know what that feeling is, and every other musky fisherman does too. But it's just all over Ben's face.
Well, and that fish, if I'm not mistaken, and we don't need to... I think I know where he caught that, because I saw a picture of it very recently, and it's a tough body of water to crack, too. It was a beautiful fish.
He was so excited.
And I think he was with Mike, right? And there was something funny with the depth finder, or they were casting funny. The whole story was hilarious.
Yeah. And it's cool that he and Mike are such good friends too. Suic Lures and us in the muskie business, and it's just we've been the muskie business has been good to a lot of people, and we are very grateful for that, and grateful for all the customers that have supported us for the last 50 years. I mean, we'd be nowhere without them, and I take it seriously, and it's tough now, because we tough in a way that it's hard. We've got so much business. COVID, and I feel guilty even saying this, but because people couldn't do anything else in 2020 and 2021 with the lockdowns and everything. They couldn't go on a trip. They couldn't get on an airplane. They couldn't get on a bus, basically. They couldn't go to a restaurant. They couldn't go to a movie. I mean, we had trouble going to the store. But what they could do is they could get in their boat and go fishing and be safely distanced from one another if they wanted to be, and that's what they did. I mean, It's amazing. Fishing license sales, up 49% across the country.
It's
and
crazy.
So everybody was doing the same thing. And our replica orders went up 60% in
That's incredible.
over our typical year in 2020 and 2021.
That's incredible,
So,
Joe.
And so we can increase the staff that we have. You can't just go out and grab somebody to throw them in a grinding room or a paint room or whatever and tell them to put that together. I mean, you just can't.
No, because that's the beauty of what you do. It's your handcrafted artwork.
Right. So we're working with what we have, and it's been tough to keep up. And we have such wonderful, gracious, patient people that allow us to do what we need to do to make sure that it's right.
And that's a tribute to your artwork, though. And people, when you have that big of a fan base, and I say fan base because people love your work. Like, and just so you know, I mean, not to tack another one on, but I caught my personal best Wisconsin fish last season, and my students are asking me like, "Oh, you're getting a replica?" And I'm like, yes, I am, and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to send it your way because it's a unique fish, and I can't wait to have it done. I'm super pumped. But,
super awesome! Thanks, Jazz.
Joe, I'm excited. Okay, last thing. And we've kind of talked about this. You know, even though you wouldn't admit it, you're such a big name. But for folks that are listening that maybe are new to musky fishing, there's a lot of folks that might be listening that are just getting into the sport, which is awesome. Welcome to musky fishing, ladies and gentlemen, and people of the musky world. Now, where can they find you, Joe? What's the best way for somebody to get a hold of Joe or Ben? Fittante Studios. What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Well, they can reach us just by calling us, and if you want that number, it's 715-627-7662. They can give us a call. They can visit our Facebook page at Fittante Taxidermy and Fish Replicas, and they can message us from there, in which a lot of people do. They can go to our website at FittanteReplicas.com, and right off that website, they can send us a notice that they're interested in a fish, and a lot of people do that. So those three different ways. You can message us, you can email us, you can call us. So and we certainly are looking forward to more muskies and more fish. And it started out with muskies, but it has been across the species. More and more people are doing lots of different fish, and northerns and walleyes and smallmouths and largemouths, and bluegills and crappies, and we're just going great guns, and we're doing a lot of saltwater fish these days as well. And people have found that they can just get back home, give us a call, don't have exorbitant shipping rates from Florida or Costa Rica or Panama or Brazil or wherever they are.
And see, Joe, this is we might have to have a part 2 at some point, because we could go down the rabbit hole, because I've seen these photos of your clients with these beautiful saltwater fish, and I'm like, how did Joe learn how to paint this stuff too? I'm like, oh my gosh.
And that's kind of interesting for me, and I can say that I look forward to doing those fish that I'm not catching, or that I have never caught, or that I don't have a stylized impression of, and where we work strictly with the reference. And it's fun for me to kind of reach out into that part of the business too. And so we're doing some sailfish, and we're doing some marlins, and we're doing tarpon, and we're doing a lot of mahi-mahis, and just took an order this morning for an African pompano and 100-inch marlin. And I'm trying to think other unique Goliath groupers, which are very cool. You got to Google those, Chaz, and take a look at those.
Oh, I've seen Goliath groupers are crazy.
You probably know what's going on there.
Yes.
We did a 12-foot shark for a guy that we actually delivered to Lower Michigan, trailered it up, and hauled it over there for them. And it was a 360-degree amount all the way around, because we put big eye hooks in the shark's back, and he suspended it over the top of his pool table.
That's wild, man.
So whatever. I mean, that's cool stuff to work on too, you know.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Anyway, we got that.
That's amazing. Well, folks listening, I think we're on the same page. This has been, for sure. If you know, I know I'm speaking for everybody. This has been a therapy session. This is Musky therapy. I feel, Joe, I don't know that I could, ask to have spoken with a more humble dude, and somebody who's just, it's so neat to see the progression of your career. And I guess sometimes they say you're just getting started. The best is yet to come. There's so many great things coming, for Fittante Studios and Replicas. And it's just like you said, it's one of those businesses that to me, I was so excited to talk with you. And we may have to, we might just have to have another podcast at some point. But it's so neat because your business is kind of, I don't want to say secretive, might not be the right word, but there's something about it that, like, you're always wondering, like, how does he do it? Or what does he do? Or, it's really a neat thing. And the other thing, if I could just recap, that really hit home with me tonight is, the powerfulness of artwork and, seeing people's reactions when you bring a moment to life for them. That really hit home for me tonight. Like, that's really...
Well, thanks, Chaz. It's really been a pleasure. One thing, too, that I've always tried to understand, and have talked to other people about this, but and maybe you can, do a podcast about this sometime. And by the way, you are an amazing interviewer. Okay. Oh. You're I mean, I've known you for a long time, dude, and you are so excitable, and you're so positive, and people just want to be around you, because that's you're attractive that way, and it's such a talent that you have to interview people that I wasn't aware of. I mean,
thanks.
Some great questions, and you got me interested.
Yeah, but you know what they say? It's a two-way road, man.
But the one thing I wanted to bring up quickly, if I can, and like I said,
absolutely, we got no rules here.
Sometime.
We could. I got no rules. I got nowhere to go. I'm enjoying talking.
Well, thanks. But what is it about this? What is it about catching a big fish and having it mounted, or just catching it? What is it about that is goes so deep into us? Why is that important, and why is that such a big deal to us?
Wow.
I mean, that is a question that I'd like to try to find an answer for. I mean, was it as kids we fished with our dads, and we were always trying to do good, and we wanted to catch a big fish, and our dad would be happy with that? Or what is it? What is it that makes us so special?
Wow.
And why do we want it? Why do we want that so badly? And that's out there. But have your listeners, chime in and maybe give you some answers on that. I'm searching for the reason. I'm glad, obviously, very grateful that we feel that it's special, because otherwise I wouldn't exist. What
we might have to do with that, because I wanted to. I mean, I think I could. I mean, I could probably say. I was thinking of things right now, because I was thinking about that my 54 incher that you and Ben did years ago now, and I was thinking about the muskie that I want to get done. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, like, boy, Joe, that's probably that's a tough question to answer, man. And we might have to maybe we'll do a listener Q&A coming up soon. We'll throw this out there to folks and get some responses, because I don't even know. You're right. Well, because you bring up something about, like, your father or your grandfather who taught you how to fish, and then it all, like, in some way the hunt culminates in this moment, and it's like it's sometimes for even. It's a lifetime worth of lessons that went into achieving this one goal, and you finally caught the biggest something of your life, and it's like it's a major feat in so many ways.
Yeah. What's at the bottom of it, though?
Maybe this, and maybe I'll throw this out there because I think you might resonate with this. I think one of the neat things too, and I think this hits back, Joe, and I think I might really be going somewhere with this. Maybe the neatest thing about it is it's not just the replica, but it comes back to, and you keep knocking at this in the background of our entire conversation, and it's very obvious to me as your interviewer, as you might call me, it's the people aspect of the replica that brings it to life. And what I want to say about that is this: that what good is a replica or a mount if it's in a barn and it's closed? You could have the most beautiful replica in the world, and it could be in a barn, and you close the doors, it'll never see the light of day, and it means nothing. But the beauty of a replica is that you can gather around it with friends and family and even new friends, and you can relive this experience based on the beauty of this thing that sits in front of you and say, that was the moment. And you can talk about it over and over and over with friends and family, and it's like this gift that keeps on giving. Maybe that might be part of it. That just kind of, and it's this.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that is one level above what I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to find out why. Why is that important? Why is catching that big fish important? I could make us feel like we feel. Why does a guy come into the shop and start crying?
No, that's a tough one.
And it comes to tears. Why? What is it about that catch that makes us feel how we feel?
That's a really deep question, though, and I don't.
Well,
I don't know.
To your listeners, and maybe they can answer it for us.
I think that's a really good idea, Joe, and that's so deep because I think there's so many ways to answer that, and it's like so unique for each person too. Dang.
Yeah. Well, it's sure been fun, Chaz. I sure appreciate that you asked me to do this, and I am grateful for the opportunity. Grateful that you and I are friends.
Yeah, Joe, I have had an absolute blast talking, and I think we're going to need to do this again. We'll do the Q&A first. Well, I want to see what folks say. But, folks...
I'm sure I'm up for it whenever you are.
Absolutely. There's so many different avenues we can go down. Well, Joe, thank you again so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Fittante. I don't want to... You're not going to agree with me, but really a legend in the musky industry. You've been around for so long, 50 years this June. I feel so honored to have you on the show here. I have had an absolutely just amazing time talking with you about this career that spans so long and all the wonderful things that you've been able to do, the people's lives that you've been able to touch. So, folks, we really hope you've enjoyed this amazing Musky Therapy podcast, and we're looking forward to having you back on soon. So enjoy this one, and as always, thanks for listening, guys. We'll be back soon.
Thanks, Chaz.